Welcome to another episode of I Wish I Was Taught That at School. My name is Emily Wallace.
And I'm Evelyn Clark. And today on our show, we have Sarah Corbell from Nick Johnston Real Estate. Thanks for coming along, Sarah.
Thank you so much for having me, Evelyn and Emily. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, good. So Sarah is a real estate agent with Nick Johnston. They're based in Brighton in Victoria. And we thought, who better to bring on the show to bust some myths around selling your home and maximising the actual sale price. Right through to how do you actually select an agent, because let's face it, not all agents are going to be right for you to sell your home. Thanks again.
Thank you for having me. Very excited to be here.
So I guess the million-dollar question, Sarah, is when is the best time to sell? And I'm sure you get asked this pretty often.
All the time, all the time. And look, there is a little bit of a myth around when is the best time to sell. Traditionally, people think it's spring.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's understandable because we're just coming out of the depths of winter. It's dark and gloomy and houses have poor natural light and gardens don't pop and the flowers aren't blooming. And so there tends to be a rush of people putting their property on the market in spring.
Yes.
Now, does that necessarily translate into higher outcomes and higher prices? Not necessarily, because it obviously comes down to market conditions at the time.
Yes.
That's right.
So I guess the first thing I always ask my potential sellers is, when is the best time for you to sell? That's the first and foremost what they have to consider. When is it best first for you? Because that, of course, then determines your level of motivation.
Yes.
So if it's not quite the right time, you might be thinking about it and you've got maybe an agent influencing you to sell and go through a campaign, you might be going through that half-heartedly and that's really not what you want to be doing. So work out, is it the best time for you? Question number one. And if you decide yes it is, then have a look at the market conditions.
Yes.
And I can tell you at the moment, obviously we all know we've been through a bit of a drop in the market.
Yeah.
We've had the Royal Commission, we've had the election, and since these two major events, we've seen a lot of buyer confidence return to the market.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
So we're seeing more buyers out there, we're seeing buyers transacting, and I know in Melbourne in the last 3 weeks we've had auction clearance rates in the 70% and above.
Hitting 80s in some cases.
Correct,
Yeah.
correct. So what that means is we're getting actually multiple buyers bidding at properties. And I know at the weekend we had an auction in Brighton and we had 6 bidders. We actually had about 14 buyers there.
Oh, wow.
That's
but
crazy.
a number of them didn't get a chance to bid.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think it comes back to supply and demand on that
Yeah,
note as
oh,
well.
absolutely.
I mean, this recording is in September of 2019 and we have hit a point in the market where there is low stock levels. Hopefully a little
Yes.
more to come before Christmas.
Yeah.
That would be nice.
Yes.
But it does, you're so right, you need to test the market conditions to make sure that your property is going to do well at that point in time.
That's right. So we're seeing at the moment in our current marketplace is that there's a huge lack of good family homes
Yeah.
for sale, and also opportunities for downsizers. So we're certainly, when we are meeting with vendors that have that particular type of property,
Yes.
that we're saying, look, if it is the right time for you, it is a tremendous time to put your property on the market,
Yeah,
where we
fantastic.
know that we're going to have competition because there's so few properties like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what about, I think another big myth in the real estate world is, does property styling help to sell homes?
100% yes. I'm a huge advocate of styling.
Yes.
And there's many reasons for it. And I think first and foremost, I don't know if you've ever walked into a property that's empty.
Oh, many times.
When you go in to see an empty property, you see it in its raw state with all its rough edges.
Yes.
And while styling isn't there to hide things, it's there to enhance the property's strong points.
Oh, absolutely.
That's how I
Very
see
true.
it.
Yeah.
So you want to put some furniture in there to really feature your strong points of the property, number one. Also, it really helps buyers imagine themselves living in that space.
That's right.
Yeah.
So buying, as we know, is such an emotional process.
Yes.
And a lot of buyers, and I'd say probably you'd know this, Emily, that a lot of buyers buy on emotion rather than on what really maybe realistically on paper is
Well, we're
best
only
for them.
humans, I suppose.
Yeah.
Even though you can
Absolutely.
say as much as you like, don't get caught up in the emotions or always have, a maximum budget in mind. At the end of the day, we are only humans and emotions are always going to play a part regardless of whether we're in check with them or not.
Absolutely.
That's very true.
Yeah. So styling a property will help play on the buyer's emotions, but it also helps feature the property and demonstrate how certain spaces are used.
Yeah, the capacity of spaces. Like, I mean, being an advocate, I say to buyers, overlook the styling and don't get sucked in. However, there is a valid point in actually knowing what capacity that space has, whether it be the dining space. Does it fit a 6 or an 8-seater?
Correct.
Is it a double bedroom or is it a queen size bed?
Yeah.
Those sorts of things actually really help sell the property, in my opinion.
Totally, yes.
It's key.
Yes, and I know I've actually just styled a property recently, and the main bedroom was actually on the smaller side.
Yes.
So when I went in, then there was nothing in the room. I thought this room is really, really small. Like this is going to be an issue.
Yeah.
As soon as we put furniture in there, it was actually reversed it, which was really incredible to see. It gave it a lot more space. It made it feel more spacious. And then it actually demonstrates to buyers, you can fit a queen size bed in here with 2 bedside tables.
Yeah.
There you go.
That's
So I
very
suppose
key.
following on from the styling question, how then does or should you look at potentially renovating certain spaces in the home to help it sell?
Yes. So look, vendors must really think about what they do with renovating before they sell. And the best thing to do is to engage an agent early on in the piece.
Yes.
And the reason I say that is often we get called in after a renovation and what they've done doesn't necessarily meet the target market's needs, desires, the latest finishes that this particular target market is after.
Yeah.
So we always say, look, if you are going to renovate or you're thinking of preparing the property for sale, start doing your research on agents.
Yes.
And decide on an agent and then sit down and say, okay, what do you think I should be doing to get this property ready for sale and how much renovation? Now, I'm actually working with a couple at the moment who asked me in and said, we're going to do this huge renovation. They're going to spend about $50,000.
Yeah.
And I said to them, that's for a property that's going to be worth around the $1.3 million mark. That's quite a large investment. I strongly suggested that we sit down and we go through the items and see what I felt they could actually leave. Because you imagine a buyer, as you would know, Emily, a buyer spends probably less than maybe 30 minutes up to an hour in a property before they make this huge purchase.
Yeah.
So the things that we notice don't necessarily the buyers will not notice, or it won't be their main point of concern. So what we did is we went through and we stripped the repair works back, and we put in the main features like maybe a fresh coat of paint, which always gives a beautiful lush appearance of a property. Definitely the styling. We put in new appliances because the appliances were quite old. We fixed up some fences that were leaning, so they weren't huge ticket items, but it's certainly given it a really fresh makeover. And they're the things that certainly when a buyer walks through, if it's glaringly obvious, fix it.
Definitely.
Because buyers will see it and they will ask themselves, well, if this isn't fixed, what else isn't done around the property? So it really gives buyers confidence when your property is styled and repaired and looking really well maintained and looked after. So that helps buyers' confidence enormously.
And so in terms of someone who's now decided that they're ready to sell their property, and they're going through that thought process, what would be your advice to someone who's looking to select an agent? If they've had their home for maybe 15 years, they haven't had a need to go and look at any property in the meantime or search realestate.com, what would be one of the first things that they could do to sort of educate themselves and do their research?
Sure. So selling can be an extremely daunting experience, especially when you may have sold maybe once before. And sometimes we're dealing with people who have never sold. They've been in the family home since sort of the 70s.
Yes.
So look, the first thing, I think a lot of people go by word of mouth and recommendations. So it might be to go to your circle of friends and ask them if they have sold in the area and who they've used and what their experience was like. So that's one port of call, but I certainly wouldn't rely on that. I think that's just one part of it. The other thing would be is to actually get out and have a look at open for inspections of some agents in your area that are selling similar types of properties to the one that you're going to sell. And this is such a good exercise because really, as real estate agents, we're on show. This
Yes.
is when we're at open for inspections, we
Yeah.
are literally demonstrating how we are working for our vendor
Yeah.
and how we conduct our business.
Yeah.
So if you're walking into an open for inspection and the agent's sitting there on their phone on social media, or they're not very respectful to you, they just say hi and take a wander through, they're not really giving you any service,
Yeah.
Yes.
they're probably not the agents you want standing on your
No.
Oh,
home.
not at
No.
all.
No. So I think really watch when you are there, watch the agent and how they're interacting with the buyers. What questions are they asking? Are they providing service? And also, you can pretend to be a buyer. There's nothing wrong with pretending to be a
mystery
buyer.
shopping.
That's right,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And see whether they follow you up. Because unfortunately, I have to say, and it's one of this thing that absolutely I find astonishing in the industry, is that I hear that a lot of agents don't even make the phone calls to the buyers to follow up.
I can attest
Well,
to
I've
that.
seen on a number of your stories on, say, a Monday or a Tuesday,
Yep.
Emily, where you'll go out to your audience and say, let's play a little game. How many of the X amount of agents that I
Really?
spoke to or saw on the weekend actually called me back?
Yeah.
And it's never 100%, is it?
It's never been 100%, and sometimes I'm inspecting 8 or 9 properties on a Saturday, and even though I'm an advocate, and of course if that property is right for my client, I'm going to call the agent.
Yes.
But I do play a bit of a game on my social media to find out how many people are right. And what's most concerning is when we sort of hit that decline in the market, which we're out of now.
Yes.
But in the depths of winter, there were so few listings. So buyers you want to grab hold of them.
Absolutely.
And we're only seeing, 40 to 50% callback rate. I just think that's really tricky. So
shocking.
I think, if you are looking to sell, and this is my recommendation too, to echo what you've said to sellers, is definitely go out and mystery shop and find out how do they actually run their business as the face of and the advocate for selling your property, because that's really, really key.
Oh, it really is. And, you need to be able to trust.
Yeah.
I think one thing that I always ask my potential sellers is, what's the most important thing to you when you're appointing an agent? And I would say 9 times out of 10, they say, I need to know I can trust you.
Yeah.
And so if you're at mystery shopping and you're seeing an agent who's not following you up, or say they will do something and they don't follow through, then I'd be saying that they're not the right agent for you. There are some very good agents out there, though,
Oh,
on a
definitely.
more positive note,
Definitely.
that will do the work.
Yeah.
The other thing that I would certainly suggest potential sellers to do is there is 2 very good resources available to them, both of them online.
Yes.
One of them is Rate My Agent website,
Yep.
and this is a website that actually vendors and buyers can actually leave reviews for the agent that
Perfect.
they purchased through or they sold through.
Yeah.
So it actually rates them with stars and according to the service that they've provided, and also a written testimonial.
Yeah.
Now this is unprompted in terms of we don't tell them what to write or what to say. It's completely an independent review.
Yes.
So if you go to ratemyagent.com.au, you will find and search for maybe your short list of agents. Have a look at their reviews and their testimonials from the vendor, but also the buyer, because you want to make sure they're being very respectful to buyers as well throughout the process.
Yes.
So that would be one tool. The other tool that I'd strongly suggest you go on is realestate.com, have a Find My Agent page.
Okay. Yeah.
And if you go on there, it's a very similar. You can actually have a look at the agents, see their average days on market.
Ah.
You can see what they've sold in the last 12 months. You can actually adjust that.
Yeah.
And you can also see reviews.
Yes.
So that'll also give you a really good feel as to the type of experience you're going to expect with this particular agent.
Definitely.
I'd also suggest that you mix the gender, that you get you make sure you get a female in the mix as well. I know there's not as many female agents as male, but we're certainly becoming a driving force in the industry.
Yeah.
And I think women just bring something different.
Yeah,
To
particularly
selling.
to be able to speak to, if you are selling family homes and it's a couple that are coming through the door, you need to be relatable to both, husband and wife.
Yes.
So it's a very, very valid point.
Yeah, and I feel that, well, certainly in my experience, women, in the majority of the cases, they make the decision.
Yeah.
So often it is. If the wife does not like the property,
Yes.
it won't be purchased.
Yeah.
It's very, very rare.
Yeah,
So
you're right
oftentimes we have wives coming to see the property, and if they approve of the property, then she'll bring her husband back with the family, and they'll look at it a second time.
Yeah.
There you go.
Wonderful. Are there any final tips that you would like to let us know about for people considering putting their property on the market, or a little bit, we don't really have to sell, but we might sell?
Yes. So I think when you're putting your property on the market, you have to take into account your advertising costs.
Yeah.
It's actually an investment. So I was going to suggest that it is a cost in terms of selling, and obviously as is the agent's fee, but it's certainly something that I highly recommend that people don't skimp on.
Yeah.
I think when you're taking your property as your biggest asset to market, you want to do it properly, and you have really one shot at it.
Yes.
So we certainly would suggest you go online.
Yeah.
You make sure you get as much exposure as possible on all the major websites, and also running open for inspections.
Yeah.
So sometimes we have vendors that would like to do just by appointment, private appointment, which I understand in terms of privacy and being a little bit more discreet. However, buyers a lot of the time don't like to make appointments because they feel very isolated in the viewing, and they feel a little bit more pressure in terms of viewing the property.
Yeah.
Whereas when it's open to the public, buyers can come in, they're allowed to wander around, ask the questions, and they can decide either way whether it's the right property for
It's
them.
not like you feel like an agent is following you around the house and watching your every move.
Absolutely. And then you want an answer sort of at the end of the inspection.
And I think if a vendor is worried about that privacy piece, well, you do collect name and numbers as someone walks through the door, and you're there to keep an eye on them as well while they're looking through the property. So there's not too much to be concerned about. I think from a buyer's point of view, a lot of people do turn to realestate.com or Domain, and they'll actually schedule their whole Saturday back to back. So if there's a property there that's by appointment, in my experience, it's like, it's a bit too hard.
It's too hard. Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
And then probably another thing would be is when you're actually deciding on an agent is to really decide, can I work with this person?
Yes.
Because you're going to be such a close team.
Yeah, that's right.
You work with your agent throughout a campaign, if it is an auction, 4 weeks, say, and you'll be hearing from your agent every day.
Yeah.
So
if you
if you don't like them,
you don't want to be looking at the phone and going,
and dreading the phone call. So it really is wise idea to obviously interview the agents, work out which is the right fit, and do I like this person? Can I see myself working with them? Are they listening?
Yes.
Do they understand my goals and objectives of the sale? Because if they don't understand that, then I don't think they're going to be getting you the result that you actually need.
Yeah.
So I think everything has to be aligned.
At the end of the day, it comes back to trust, doesn't it?
It certainly does.
Yeah.
It's based on trust and your relationship and integrity and your level of professionalism. Definitely.
Well, I have one final question for you. What about in particular markets, and perhaps for our viewers and listeners that may not know the difference between different types of campaigns, when would they perhaps look at, say, an off-market opportunity versus more of your traditional auction style strategy?
So an off-market opportunity generally comes to us when people perhaps aren't quite ready to sell just yet. So I actually have such an opportunity at the moment of a lovely family home. They're downsizers, but they would like to know where they're going to before they place their property on the market, because they don't want to be stuck with selling their home and then they are forced into buying something that potentially doesn't suit them, or that they have to go and rent, and there's that second step in between, which can be
messy.
tiring and a lot of work and messy, as you say. So generally we do an off-market. So at the moment I'm taking buyers through that I'm meeting by private appointment. They know it's off-market. My vendor is a definite seller at a price before we take it through a campaign. But at the moment it's off-market, and you have the opportunity to purchase the property before it gets exposed to the market. So it's actually, it makes the property quite exclusive in some respects. So that's generally an off-market. So there's no advertising. You still obviously pay the agent if they get a result for you that's acceptable. So there's the professional fee for service, but no marketing fees, and generally no boards, no signs, not on the internet.
Yep.
So we just work our database,
Yes.
therefore.
Yeah.
So that's an off-market. And then, of course, we've got auction campaign. That's generally in Melbourne, a 4-week campaign. If we've got public holidays, we go either side of those public holidays, and we might prolong it for maybe 5 weeks. And then, of course, you've got your private sale and expressions of interest.
Yes.
So I guess expression of interest is very similar to a private sale, but with an end date.
Yep.
Yes.
And then you have your private sale, which generally you've got your statement of information in your quote range, and you know that the vendor is willing to sell within the price that's actually quoted to you in the statement of information.
Fantastic. So much knowledge to share.
Yeah,
Sarah.
so much. I could go on and on.
We could be here for hours.
Thank you so much for all your insights. I think it's been a massive value add to our listeners who may be considering selling their home, because it's not something you do every day of the week.
No,
So
it's
having an
not.
expert in to talk about it has been wonderful. So thank you so much for your insights. We
My
really
pleasure.
appreciate it.
Thank you for
So
having
Sarah,
me.
we've come to one of our favourite parts of our podcast now, where we called You've Been Schooled. So this is where we
Great.
bring you a little piece of information that perhaps you haven't heard of. It could be either a fun fact or just a random fact.
Yeah.
Emily, you're going to school us today.
I am going to school you today. So this actually blew my mind. The IKEA catalogue is the most widely distributed book in the world. It has 200 million copies distributed every year.
That's
And
incredible.
it's in all different languages, it's across the world, and obviously the thickness of it is crazy, right? Like
Yes.
IKEA has so
Yes.
many
So
things in
many
it,
things.
but
Yeah.
how crazy is that?
That's
that it's
insane.
Yeah,
Like
that's
that
the power
just
of a
show-
brand, right?
Massive.
Absolutely.
Massive.
And what they have to offer, I
Yes.
guess.
Yeah.
I think they really appeal to such a wide range of buyers, you know, whether you're living in an apartment or you're in a larger family home, all the knickknacks. I know when I go to IKEA, I just 2 or 3 hours later I
That's right. Do you know what?
come out with all
They
these
have-
things I don't necessarily need,
Yeah,
but they look great.
They've absolutely nailed the psychology of selling within their little
Oh, gosh, yeah.
absolutely. The one
maze.
way.
Yeah.
The one way.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming along, Sarah. As we say, our listeners
thank you so
have
much
learned
for
a
having
lot,
me.
I'm sure, today.
Great.
How can they find out more about you or perhaps contact you if they've got further questions?
Absolutely. So they can go on to either realestate.com or Rate My Agent and look for my name, Sarah Korbel. That's with a K, Korbel. Or go onto the Nick Johnston website. My email address, I'm sure you'll have in the show notes,
Yep,
and my
certainly
number
will.
there
Sure will.
if they'd like to call and even just have a chat and ask me some questions.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily have to be looking to sell anything. I'm happy just to give some guidance at any
Oh,
time.
fantastic.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And thanks for listening to another episode of I Wish I Was Taught That at School. Don't forget to follow us on our Instagram account @with Evelyn and Emily, as well as our YouTube channel.